I'll call to order this informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Today is Tuesday, September 25th, 2012, and welcome everyone here at Carnegie Town Hall and those of you watching on CityLink and on SiouxFalls.org. It's great to have you all here. Start with staff report. Our Legislative Operations Manager, Jim David.
Good afternoon, Council. Staff is currently working on our legislative platform for the upcoming 2013 legislative session. Within your packet there, you should have a list of 4 items that we are currently looking at. I could read them all if it's the decision of the Council.
First, Jim, if we have them in our packet, why don't you briefly run through them?
Okay. The first item is that the Council supports legislation giving municipalities the authority to revoke alcoholic beverage licenses for establishments with underage sales violations. The second one is the Council supports legislation giving municipalities the authority to restrict the possession of firearms or any dangerous weapons in any building occupied as official office of the municipal elected officials or any building where the municipal governing body officially meets on a regular basis. The third item supports legislation to allow future employees to become members of the South Dakota retirement system. And the final item supports legislation giving any municipality, sanitary sewer district, or other government subdivision or combination thereof the ability to charge customers for past and future capital costs for new capacity. If possible, I'd like to get any additional items by October 5th, so hopefully we can have this resolution for your decision at either the second or third Tuesday in October.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
As you know, South Dakota Municipal League meets next week, and they'll have a whole list of things to add to that as well. So thank you for your report. Moving on, we'll take a report from the Land Use Committee from the meeting of Tuesday, September 18th. Or Councilor Rolfing is not here. Anyone want to report in his place? I listened to the meeting but didn't attend. We'll just say duly noted. Are there notes there for him? Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Let's move on to City Council open discussion. Any items for open discussion this afternoon? Councilor Staggers?
Yes, I guess become a little concerned about one entity of the city government when it comes to transparency. And what I'm referring to is the Charter Revision Commission. The Charter Revision Commission has decided not to meet in the chambers here to have it recorded, and instead to meet in another room where it's not recorded. And since we talk so much about transparency in government, I wish we could communicate to them that, we have a concern that they're not meeting here and having it recorded so everybody can, have access to what they are doing. So,
I think, Councilor Staggers, that those are working sessions like we do in that overflow room. I can't speak for the Charter Revision Commission, obviously, but that is my understanding of the schedule. Any questions or comments for Councilor Staggers? Councilor Aguilar is nodding her head, agreeing. Yeah. It's
yes,
just their work sessions.
From observing their meeting, it was because they're going to have work sessions, and then they will meet in, I think it's January, after they've had the work sessions, and they will start either January or February, start meeting again in the chambers, and all that they want to bring forward will always be done on, be televised and in the chambers. Mm-hmm. And again, it is really similar to what we do as a council when we have work sessions.
Yeah.
More open conversation. Councilor Entenmann.
And it is. The public are invited to those work sessions, too. They're not held secretively or anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. I think the schedule went out just again today. It came by email or press release or whatever. Yeah. Councilor Staggers?
But I guess I'm still concerned. I mean, obviously, we should be setting a good example, too. And maybe we should be thinking about having the work sessions here, too, being recorded. But since they're dealing with the Charter Revision Committee, they're unelected people, I think it's even, more imperative, since they're dealing with our Constitution, so to speak, of the city, that what they're thinking of in work sessions should be available to the public at large, instead of having them talking about, I know they're going to be talking about the city council, and I think it's would be good to have that available, because I'm probably not going to be able to come to the session when they talk about the city council or the mayor or whatever, and this should be readily available.
Okay, other comments, questions? Any action you'd like to take, Councilor Staggers? Or just
Well, I
let it
don't
be
know.
duly
I don't know
noted?
if the rest of the members of the council would be willing to go along with just, having you mention something to them about we would like to have them.
It's up to council, I guess. I don't agree. I do believe in work sessions. I believe that conversation is more open and informal in those sessions, and that everything is public then and recorded in open meetings and it's not a closed meeting, as Councilor Intiman said. But I would do the wishes of the council if you would like me to speak to the Charter Revision Commission, or if you want them to just know that some of us are concerned. Thoughts, Councilor Anderson?
I'm not so much worried about the work sessions, but I think I would like to see them, more basically here and recorded, so that more people are able to see what direction they are talking about leading our city into, or at least the suggestions that they're going to make. By being in the large meeting room and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a lot of people are not going to be available to make those type of meetings. So it's going to be even more harder for the public to learn what they're doing until January, when they return to this forum here. So I guess just my concern is that they're not recorded. Are their minutes going to be posted online, something like that?
Their minutes are always posted online, as are ours from working sessions. All the minutes are online. Everything's available. Other comments? I'm getting only 2 people telling me they want me to talk to the Charter Revision Commission. Okay, I'm going to move on. Next topic for open discussion.
Can you maybe say there are some council members that are concerned about that?
I think that it's been duly recorded here and now, and I think that's sufficient for me, unless the rest of the council, and there's Councilor Aguilar.
City Attorney Fifely attends all those meetings, and he can pass it on to
Okay,
the
great.
Charter Revision
Thank you.
Commission.
Because as I don't always attend either, so thank you. All right.
One more question
Yes,
then.
Councilor Anderson.
Is any of our staff attending those?
Yes.
Jim David or?
The city clerk. So City Clerk Lori Hogstead, Legislative Operations Manager Jim David, and our budget analyst Dave Bixler are all attending those meetings.
Can I request that they give the council a brief after those meetings of what's happening per email? Okay. They update us on a lot of other things, including the meetings on Friday, so I would see that as being something similar.
How does staff feel about that?
Sure, we could, we'll be present for all those meetings, and we could summarize the discussion and just send you some notes from the working session.
And I guess as chair, I'm going to suggest that they are just brief notes, because the minutes will be available online. You can read every word of the minutes. So, but yeah, that would be great if you would just summarize quickly and briefly for us. All right. Other topics, Councilor Jameson.
I'd just like to wrap up on that Charter Revision Commission. Those folks are, I think, lumbering through the charter, and they've got to take their time. And I think that they were very uncomfortable sitting here the last time, and I was probably in their face a little more than they appreciated. So I'm okay with giving them the workspace that they need. And the timeline is such that there's plenty of time here for things to unfold. When and if they come up with something that needs to be voted on by the public, there'll be ample time for us to review it. So I just wanted to reach out that, those guys probably just need to calm it down a little bit in their own world and do a work session like we've done, and had that same experience of calming down and let them refocus. From a guy who attended those other ones, I can appreciate the position that they were in. That's all.
Then just a reminder that nothing regarding the charter will be on any kind of ballot until 2014. There is plenty of time for this conversation. Councilor Karski.
I'm not going to be talking about the Charter Revision Committee, so open a new door here. Several months ago, Councilor Jameson and I were tasked with the CIP Review Committee thought process, I guess. And over the last several months with meetings between our legislative and operations and Dave Bixler and Jim David and the administration, department heads, we've kind of gone maybe a different direction, and we decided we're going to, at next week's fiscal committee, kind of going to give you a hook for next week's fiscal committee meeting, we're going to be discussing the idea of more public process for our budget. We just completed our budget for 2013, but in reality our budgeting process for 2014 is already beginning. And we would like to discuss the idea through our fiscal committee meeting next week of having an open house, having department heads available, and with the eventual outcome, you have in front of you a resolution from 2003, I believe it is, yes, 2003, that the council back then developed regarding goals and objectives of the council. So kind of a short time frame here, but over the next 6 weeks, we would be looking at, through this open house and public process, of establishing a resolution similar to this to be presented to the administration in November for the 2014 budget process. So next week's fiscal committee meeting, I think we'll have a lot of open and public discussion about if this is a very good or viable idea.
Good. Comments or questions for Councillor Karski?
I don't know if Councillor Jameson would have anything he'd like to add to that.
I would. Thank you. Yes, the efforts that we put forward last few months on the CIP Review Committee, I think just evolved into a better, maybe collaborative process. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is improve our communication and cooperativeness with the administration, primarily the finance, public works, parks, planning, basically because they're the heavy hitters of the CIP process and the budget process. And I think at the end of the day, what we'll have is a better informed council about what the intentions of the public is and what we should be thinking about, and as well a cooperative nature with the administration on developing the upcoming budget. And along the year, we'll get updates potentially on what they're working on, and we'll become more entrenched in this budget process so that when the budget is delivered to us from the mayor, we've probably got a pretty good feel of what's in there and what's not treated as such a surprise. And then at the end of the day, it's a collaborative effort because we've participated. We've clearly communicated with the administration of what we think is important. And then in turn, the administration will have a chance to reflect that in the budget and make the whole process smoother. And so I think it's evolved into a better solution that should work for all of us. Tracy Turbeck's been a big part of that. He's been a conduit of communication between the administration and the fiscal committee staff. So we're kind of bringing it out now because the timeline is such that we need to move it along. And if we waited till next week when we had our fiscal committee and then only reported the week later of what happened, we'd just be off time. So we're kind of bringing it out here, looking for a little feedback. If there's problems or objections, we can still talk about it all week until our next meeting, but we're really putting it on the fast track, I guess is what I'm saying.
Questions or comments for either? Yes, Councillor Antoman.
Councillor Jameson, so you're looking at kind of a concept where, like a public hearing then, where you're going to ask the people to come in and say, okay, you know, in 2014 we have a proposed thing, you know, we have a 5-year CIP budget, so we know that this is some of the dollars that the administration has kind of allocated. What are your thoughts, or what other suggestions might you have in areas that we might look at investing? Is that what you're kind of thinking about? And then we can kind of fine tune it maybe and get some more input from the administration or whatever it is that we might have, or questions that we might have to ask?
Now, the initial thought was only initial thoughts. We just had it minutes ago before this meeting. The idea is that we would actually invite Public Works, Parks, Finance, Planning to come, and we would set up boards about all the things we're going to do in 2013, all the things that we've already budgeted, things that we know are going to be done. You know, 14, 15, 16 are all out there. But the intention is to have a 2-hour session where the public could come in. It's just an open house mingling type thing, and we'll have a place to take notes. They don't have to testify at a microphone, but they would have a chance to express what they think the city should be doing in the short term, mid-term, long-term kind of thing. And we can absorb those ideas and think about them, and then we'll have our own. But at the end of the day, the hope is to exactly give that information over to the administration so they're aware of that same interest from the public and from the council, so they're better informed about what objectives are needed to be met. Now, yeah, you're right, there certainly is a CIP plan out there, and as we know, they're flexible, and they can be shared with the public as they come too. We could absolutely do that. The whole intent is to involve the public more than we've ever done before, and probably engage the council further ahead of the schedule than we've ever done before. So that's really our mission, I think.
Thank you.
And I was just to add to that too, basically, we're looking at developing a plan, a strategic plan, a business plan, and not like any business plan, we're always going to be able to modify it. It's going to be a living plan that we can take and adapt as we move along. But just have, you know, for example, Councilor Rolfing's been voicing his concern. Okay, we have Lewis and Clark water right now, but what about in 25 years from now? You know, we really don't have a vision or a plan, and be able to set that through the fiscal committee and through this process for us to have a resolution and a plan.
Good. Other comments or questions about this topic? I would just note, I wrote a note to myself, I've done some reading on this process. It's not we're not reinventing a wheel in terms of inviting the public in early in the process. And I was just going to send you a copy of an article that kind of summarizes all of that stuff. So that might be helpful, might not. But just know that we've had those conversations. And some of us have been doing research on that process. And I'm just really excited to hear that we're thinking about going that direction. That's great. Very cool. Any other comments or questions about this topic? Moving on, open discussion. Any other counselors?
Madam
Councilor
Chair.
Aguilar.
Since we have changed our schedule to Tuesdays and moved some of the meetings around, I took note that there are 5 Tuesdays in October. And at this point, will we have an informational? Because there will be no other committee meetings or joint meetings or city council meeting.
On that last Tuesday in October?
That would be the 30th.
Staff, can you help me on this? Do we have anything set on agendas that night?
We may, I can't remember right offhand. If we do, we could certainly move those items around.
What's the feeling of the council? 5 Tuesdays, we read, okay, I'm getting the cut it off.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
that was kind of why we tried to organize our meetings differently.
Right, exactly.
And so maybe, because that is not in the ordinance for well, it says every Tuesday, but maybe we could make it a practice that if there are 5, that we don't just have a meeting unless there is the need for one.
Okay, I'm seeing kind of consensus on that. I'm not seeing anybody dying to meet 5 Tuesdays in a row. All right, I'll just direct staff to go ahead and jigger those around a little bit for us, and we'll see if we can't take that Tuesday off. Good, thank you. Very thoughtful ideas. Other comments, open discussion? I have just a couple of things. One, a reminder that I will be at South Dakota Municipal League next week, all week. Yes, you heard it right. I'll be in Pierre all week, Tuesday night through. So I will be arriving there by 7 o'clock. I have a meeting Tuesday night, 7 o'clock. So I won't be here. Councilor Arenteman will be sitting in as chair on Tuesday and covering the Friday meetings as well, because I won't be back. And then my other thought, comment, things that have started to kind of bubble up in terms of housekeeping type things. We're getting to the point where some of us are ready to change seating assignments. If you have requests for that, let me know. I don't know what that says about who your seating partners are, but I'll just let that be. And then the other thing is, if there are requests we've been into this setup for a little while, if you have requests for changing committee assignments, I'll be looking at those as well in the next couple of weeks. So let me know how you feel about where you're at. Any other open discussion items? All right, let's move on. Presentations. A presentation from the monthly Event Center project update. Mike Cooper is our speaker this afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, City Council members. It's been 2 months since we've had a chance to update you as well as the citizens of Sioux Falls about our favorite project that's going on within the community, the Event Center. A lot of exciting things have been happening, and you'll hear some of the progress that we've been making today through these presentations. And obviously the big step that we took forward was the official groundbreaking ceremony, which is probably the warmest ceremony on record for a groundbreaking, but it turned out really nice, and it was a nice way to let the community know that we have officially started this project. So I'm going to begin the discussions today with an update as far as where we're at with our management agreements. As you know, we've been working for some time on 2 separate agreements based on an RFP process that we went through a number of months ago, a selection committee that was made up of city staff as well as citizens of Sioux Falls, went through a very intensive review of the proposals and interviews and researching materials, and recommended to us that we would select SMG to manage our facilities and Ovations for the food and beverage services. And we have been working diligently for many, many weeks, going through many drafts of these 2 agreements. And today we're excited to announce that we believe we're ready to move those forward to begin the public review process as well as the City Council review process. And so those 2 agreements are now out as of today for public review, and we do have some hard copies that we brought today as well. A reminder that these 2 agreements cover all 3 existing facilities, the arena, the convention center, and the Orpheum Theater, plus our brand new Denny Sanford Premier Center. And after discussing the fact that we were getting close to completing these agreements with the City Council leadership, the recommendation was made that we should review these with the City Council more comprehensively on October 9th at the 4 o'clock informational meeting. And so we plan to have a very detailed overview and discussion at that time. Jim Wiederich with Woods Fuller Law Firm has been our main negotiator, facilitator, representing the team. Susan Seeger with Crossroads Consulting will also plan to be here, as well as Gloria Pinkerton with the Bigelow Companies. Those are our 2 consultants that have been helping us review the proposals and work through these agreement contracts. And of course, we'll also have representation from SMG and Ovations, both the local folks as well as the corporate representation. So I don't know if Councilor Erpenbach, if you have any other comments, but that's a direction that we want to go on. Between now and then, we have 2 weeks. If you have any questions, I would be happy to visit with you individually, or if you have questions that you want to submit to me ahead of time, then we can try to address those.
That will be the only thing that we look at that evening on the October 9th.
Correct.
Right, we've set the agenda so it's that way.
Right.
So
today, quickly, just a very high-level overview. The SMG agreement is a 5-year term starting in January 1 of 2013. It's important to note that SMG will have exclusive authority not only for the day-to-day operations of the facilities, but also of the food and beverage operator. And one of the things that we'll show you and talk to you about on the 9th is how both of those companies will be able to work seamlessly together for not only booking events, but also managing the facilities. SMG will receive a management fee like they do today. The annual base fee will begin at $100,000 with an annual escalator of 2.5%. They will also be eligible for incentives, which we currently have provided within their existing contract, up to a maximum of $200,000 beginning the first year, and that incentives also has a 2.5% annual escalator. What's interesting to note is that the management fee that we would be paying SMG to operate all 4 of those facilities will actually be less than what we paid SMG and Global during last year's budget year. So we're looking at a 24% reduction off the bat. So that's a good deal for the community. SMG, in addition to giving us a very good deal on the management fee, has also committed to provide $275,000 cash towards the facility that we could use at our discretion with the city approval for operational costs or marketing. And so again, we have the ability to decide how that money can be spent over the life of that contract. The second agreement was with Ovations for food and beverage. That would also be a 5-year term, again beginning in January of 2013. 3 things that really stood out in their proposal that the selection committee thought was top-notch and that we've been working on through these negotiations is their theme of quality food and their slogan that everything's fresh. And so that's really what their corporation emphasizes, is using local foods, using fresh foods. They have another incentive or initiative whereby for certain types of events, rather than just getting a standard choice of 1 plate or 2 plates, you would actually be able to have 3 or 4 selections off a menu during a major event, which is pretty unique. And of course, they also have a number of local partnerships that they've established over the years in Sioux Falls. And with their proposal, they talked about even increasing that number as we move into the new event center. So those were 3 really strong aspects of the Ovations proposal. The city will not pay Ovations a management fee. All of their revenue will come strictly from commissions on gross receipts. Ovations will also be responsible for paying all direct operating costs of the facilities. The commission rate will vary, as you'll see in the detailed agreements, depending on the type of event, whether it's concessions or catering. But on average, over the 5-year term, it's going to be just under 37%. And again, we'll be able to go through more detail with you on the 9th of different types of commissions that they would be charging. Also, in addition to SMG, Ovations have indicated that they would be making a capital commitment into the facilities of $640,000, again, that we could use for marketing and equipment. The focus of this would be on, obviously, food and beverage related components that would encourage us to do even more in the future in terms of revenue, marketing, other sponsorships that would be attractive towards the facility. And this $640,000 would be spent over the 2013 and 2014 years. So between SMG and Global, we've reduced the management fees. We're going to have really strong commissions because of very aggressive marketing, food and beverage sales. And we're going to have an initial infusion of $915,000, $915,000 towards operating, marketing, and equipment. So we thought those were 2 really big wins for the community and for the facility. The next topic that I'll touch on is coordinating our parking. We've gone through 2 really successful major weekends of events at Howard Wood Field. The Dakota Bowl, the President's Bowl, as well as the marathon and half marathon. We've been working very hard with the volunteers, with the user groups, with the facilities, Howard Wood Stadium folks, school district, as well as the fairgrounds, to try to put together the best options available for parking during these big events. And you can see in the quote there that the President's Bowl was very successful. The co-chairs thought that From that standpoint, the parking was great, and we have not received any significant complaints or concerns about either of those 2 weekends. So we've got a good start, but now we have some even bigger challenges coming up during the month of October. The Festival of Bands is scheduled for October 6th, which is pretty much a whole day event. And we've been working hard with that committee to put together their contingency plans of everything from where the bands will be, the buses, the people that will be attending that event throughout the day. And the really major challenging event that we'll be looking at is on October 20th, which will be the USD NDSU football game starting at 6 o'clock, Stampede game starting at 4 o'clock, and then a trade show called Etc. for Her, which will be going on throughout the day until 5 o'clock. So we, again, are spending a lot of time working with each of these entities, and up to this point, we feel really confident that we're going to have some good solutions on how to deal with all the parking, the staging of buses, the tailgating, all the things that are going to happen during that day of October 20th. The final slide that I have, I'm going to have Darren Smith come up here too, because we've been working on this together. We've talked in the past about working on a master plan for this area around the event center. This is a partnership between community development and planning. This graphic just shows you the study area that we're looking at with some of the key destinations. And we thought that after looking at how this is coming together, it's a lot of information, it's a lot of detail, and so we thought that we would, rather than going into a lot of explanation today, that we would rather look at scheduling a date in October that we could release this and provide more of a time frame to go through an explanation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Darren. You can follow up on that and just keep rolling along with your portion. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. And there will be much more to come in December with that, and perhaps we'll have some questions at the end here related to the master plan. Darren Smith, Director of Community Development. Advance the slides here. As a reminder, on October 1st, the Legend Sales and Marketing Agreement, which this City Council approved earlier this month, becomes effective. That will trigger a number of things that they will begin to work on. And I'm going to touch on a few of those. And before I do that, one of the actions that they've already taken is to hire a local sales director, which will be the local lead for this project. Per the agreement, they consulted with us, and we had a role in that process. I'm happy to report that the local sales director we'll have for this project will move here on November 5th and begin at that time. A young guy with his wife-to-be. They're going to be married in December. They're going to move here in November and live here permanently for the next 2 years, give or take, the life of the agreement. This person has been working on the San Francisco 49ers project for Legend Sales and Marketing for the last year. He's been one of their top performers associated with that project, which is just a little bit bigger than ours. He was selected for that position from approximately 1,000 applicants. So he's someone that they're very high on internally, and we're excited to have working here. He's originally from Omaha, so he'll have the opportunity to come home, and this is a position that he aggressively pursued internally. So again, we're excited about that. He will be the local lead as a sales director, but Ben Wrigley and John Alper, two individuals you've seen here a number of times, will still very much be involved and will be supervising this person and Legend staff going forward. So just to touch on a few of the things that Legends will be doing starting in October, one of the first things they'll do is launch the market analysis. And the market analysis consists of approximately a 10 to 15 minute electronic survey that will be sent literally to a few thousand businesses and individuals in Sioux Falls and in the Sioux Falls region. It will ask a number of questions about suites, loge boxes, club seats, sponsorship opportunities, And in doing all of that and collecting information, that will really help them and help us develop the various premium seating and sponsorship packages going forward, the price points, and so forth. So that'll be key. A few other things they'll get to work on immediately, asset identification. So they will physically go through the existing facilities, the arena, the convention center, and then through the event center blueprints very carefully, and they will put together a long list of literally every asset that could possibly be sponsored or made available for sponsorship in those facilities. They'll also be interfacing closely with the architects and the contractors on the project, so we'll be looking for every opportunity to maximize revenue generation on that site, particularly in the new event center, but also the other two. So that'll be very important as well. The market analysis will play a point in that, telling us where the demand is and what amenities people are looking for and so forth. And then finally, what all of that leads to is developing and implementing a marketing plan and sales strategy. And I would suspect very early in 2013, the premium seating and sponsorship sales will start in earnest. And with that, I'll look forward to questions, and I'll turn it over to Tracy Turback at this time.
Thank you, Darren. Tracy Turback with the Finance Office. The financial summary through the month of August, this format of this slide should begin to look familiar to you. We've used this a couple times in the past in recent updates, and will continue to do so in the future. I will walk through it briefly. There are a couple things I want to highlight as I go through this, and then elaborate on one item as well. At the top of the slide, of course, are project funding, and it starts out with a breakdown of the public funding for the project. And of course, when I refer to public funding, I'm referring to the $115 million commitment that was endorsed by the voters last fall. And the city is working on three components to fulfill that $115 million commitment. There's a small portion, as you folks know, of city cash that is programmed into the project budget of $500,000. The remaining $114.5 million will consist of two bond issues. Those dollars will be raised by selling second penny sales tax bonds in two series. The 2012 A series, you might recall, was actually sold already earlier this year in March. That sale raised $102 million of the $115 million commitment. And so that leaves $12.5 million yet to be raised, and I'll elaborate that on when I get to my next slide. But those three components will comprise the total public funding for the project of $115 million. Now, near the center of the slide, we've added a section that reflects private funding that will help to cover certain project costs. And this is a new part of the financial summary presentation. The private funding identified here, of course, relates to the naming rights agreement that you approved last month. The $2 million commitment for donation by Sanford Health to be used for further enhancements to the facility, and I think you're familiar with those enhancements. As Darren Smith mentioned a moment ago, part of the role that Legends will be playing as they work through the process is to perhaps identify additional opportunities for further enhancements to the facility that might be funded with private dollars. So the public funding of $115, when added to the $2 million of private funding, provide a total project funding amount of $117 million. You can see in the lower portion of the schedule there the project expenditures through the month of August. Since the election in November, last November, approximately $4.1 million has been expended. That amounts to about 3.5% of the total project amount, so we're still just getting started, truly. You will see that in the next few months ramp up significantly. particularly in the area of construction costs. You can see we've spent approximately $500,000 through August on construction expenses. The bulk of the $4.1 million that's been spent have been on professional fees, predominantly the architectural fees, which is very typical of a large project like this where we're incurring a lot of those soft costs or design costs up front. So that leaves us about $112.9 million of funds to be expended yet over the course of the next year and a half or so. I want to talk a little more about that additional $12.5 million to round out the $115 million in public funds. As I mentioned, that will be raised through a second penny sales tax bond sale, a Series 2012B bonds. That will raise the 12.5 by selling taxable bonds. The initial sale in March was all tax-exempt bonds. The second sale will be comprised of taxable bonds, and you've heard me talk about that before. So the rationale or the use of the proceeds from the taxable bonds will be for specific costs associated with the construction of the project where we are generating dollars from private sources, such as suites. So the dollars that are raised from the $12.5 million in taxable bonds will be used to cover the costs of constructing suites and food and beverage areas of the building. Those things then can, because they're financed with taxable bonds and not tax-exempt bonds, we are not encumbered or hindered by the limitation on how much private dollars we can generate through that source. So it's a strategy to try to maximize the amount of private funding that we generate throughout the life of the facility to support the operations. The sale is tentatively scheduled for mid-October. We've been working on the bond documents for this second bond sale and have scheduled the sale for October 15th, although that is certainly subject to change depending on what might occur over the next several weeks in terms of the changes in the market. The bonds in October will be sold using exactly the same method of sale that was used in March for the 2012A bonds. That is, we will be taking competitive bids on the bonds, and the successful bidder will be the one that provides us, the city, the lowest overall interest costs on those bonds. The last point I want to touch on is the 2012 bond principal and interest payments. You might recall that the council was interested in putting us into repayment mode as quickly as possible when we put together the financing plan for this project. So we have scheduled payments to be made on the bonds prior to the end of this year. And so we will be coming back once the final payment schedules are set, which will occur after obviously the bonds are sold. We'll be back very shortly after that with a budgetary amendment to formalize the appropriation so we can make those initial payments yet before the end of the year. So with that, I will turn things over to Mark Cotter, who will give you an update on the design and construction activities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. I have a few slides today to catch you up on the progress that's been made on the design and construction. The design team continues to work on the drawings to finalize respective sections so we can ultimately take them to market, price them out, and track their costs as they come through the construction. There's also many hours that are focused not only with the design team but also Mortensen on the respective systems for the building. So it's been a very good collaborative effort. Bid Package 4, which is essentially the enclosures for the outside of the building, but the respective rooms will be, the design drawings will be handed over to the construction team later this week. We'll go out to the market and get those prices by late October. All right, on and off site, we essentially have two work zones that are off site with McCart Field and the off site sanitary sewer and work that's happening on site. Any given day, there's 42 to 46 people that are working on site with the current work that's underway. The field offices have been moved in for some of the primary subcontractors. Temporary power has been brought to the site so they can all tap off that. The key work that's happening on site is the site foundation work. There's two types of foundations. There's shallow foundation, which Pesca Construction locally is doing, and then there's deep pile foundation, which is Vite is doing. The sanitary sewer collection, the utilities right underneath the facility are going in, and the picture to the right, that white pipe that is sticking up, that's sanitary sewer collection pipe. And then also rock blasting. There's areas on this site where the rock's low, and there's areas where it's very shallow. The picture in the lower left is a picture of a shot right as they were blasting, just to give you a representative of what that looks like when that work occurs. Picture on the lower right is the deep pile foundations being driven into the ground. All right, just want to give you a picture of Mortensen does a very good job organizing the site and how they approach work areas for respective subcontractors. And so this is a picture, this is a drawing for the foundations where they've identified where Pesca can work in G, H, and B. And primarily the work in G and H is completed for those shallow foundations, and Pesca is currently working in B. And Vite with the deep pile foundations is working in area C. As different subcontractors move in, there's a very organized approach each day to who's working where so they can best manage the job. Just have a couple pictures here. The picture in the upper left is what we consider a shallow foundation, where the rock is relatively close to the surface. The contractor is required to clean down to the rock. They drill into the rock, and you see some of those steel rebar that have been anchored into the rock with an epoxy that essentially holds the foundation vertically and horizontally after it's been poured. The picture in the lower right is deep pile foundations that are arriving at the site ready to be installed. All right, if you've had a chance to drive by the site or close to McCart Fields, you see that a lot of work is progressing on McCart. It's gone really well. Essentially, local contractors from SoCup Construction, Dakota Contracting, Merlin Royce. There's a mason from T, South Dakota. Just a number of local contractors that have really done a nice job pulling this additional parking together, with an overall goal being fully ready for the USD NDSU game October 20th, but it's progressing far sooner than that. Right now we're tentatively planned a ribbon cutting for October 12th, and it should be a very nice day to celebrate the addition of this parking close to the site. The off-site sanitary sewer, this is work that as you drive Russell Street, there's on the north side of Russell Street, the service road is progressing toward the site. This essentially allows us to set up the AKA Super Flush, so not only for the arena and the convention center, their needs, but for the new event center. It's going extremely well. As it progresses down and gets ready to turn toward the event center, we will restore the service road surfacing before we then start to progress across Russell Street. So Kemp Excavating, a local contractor, is doing that work, and it's going very well. They also have rock blasting needs on their job, and they blast twice a day, once at 11 and once at 4. So a lot of rock being removed. Okay, an update on just bid packages. About 60% of the work has been bid and is tracking well. Recently, bid package 3 was gone to the market, and we received pricing back on steel, horizontal concrete, elevators and escalators, the ice rink and the ice plant, and the food service equipment. These subcontractors, again, are subcontractors of Mortensen Construction. Tomorrow we will announce who the steel and the horizontal concrete subcontractors will be. So if you have the opportunity to come out to the arena at 10 a.m., we'll make those announcements with Mortensen Construction. Bid package 3.5 is one that we pulled out of 4. We wanted to be able to buy out the seats early, and so we've received those proposals back. There's been 3 proposals received. Interviews with those respective firms are this week, and I would expect over the course of the next 3 weeks we'll be finalizing that seating selection. Okay, renderings of the building are being refined, and once they're refined, we will unveil them at an upcoming press conference. Koch Hazard's taken the lead architecture for the interiors of the building and just done a fantastic job designing a first-class facility, and we look forward to bringing those updated renderings for you and the community forward. All right, that concludes my update. We do want to encourage people to stay engaged. We've gotten a lot of traffic with the website, and so if you go to the city's website and track with the video, you can see work progressing each day of the week except Sunday. So with that, the design team or the project team is here. We can answer your questions.
Great. Thank you all. Questions from council? Councilor Karski.
I guess my question would probably be for Director Turbach, if you don't mind, Tracy, regarding our bond sale that we're coming up. Refresh my memory. What interest rate did we have on our first bond sale?
The 2012A bonds, which again were tax-exempt bonds that we sold in March, had an overall interest rate of 3.21%.
Okay. And with this bond sale, these are going to be taxable bonds. We haven't seen any changes in our bond rating. I mean, I imagine because they are taxable, they may be a little bit higher. Or do we have any anticipation on that at this time?
We have not seen any change in the bond rating, although that's part of the process we'll be going through over the next month, is to get our bond rating updated. Each time you take a bond issue to market, that's part of the process, is to have the bond rating agencies review everything to do with the financing that you're putting out on the market and reevaluate your bond rating. But I certainly don't anticipate any changes in our rating. All other things being equal, taxable bonds will carry a higher interest rate than tax-exempt bonds. I think for obvious reasons, investors are willing to accept a lower return on their investment if they don't have to pay income tax, federal income tax on that. With that said, interest rates continue to be very, very favorable. They may even have come down some since March. The other thing that I should point out is that part of the approach and the strategy that we've taken when we issued the bonds in March was to essentially leave room within what we had planned to pay for debt service in the payment schedule, so that some of the bonds that we sell next month will be paid off. In fact, they will be paid off over a much shorter period of time than the tax-exempt bonds, because the sooner we pay off the taxable bonds, because they have higher rates, the lower overall interest costs we will incur. And so the overall rate on this bond issue will be very, very attractive. I think you'll be very pleased with it when you see it. I certainly expect that. Part of that is due to the shorter maturity. We won't have bonds on this sale maturing in 20 years, and typically the further out in time before those bonds mature, the higher the rate will be. So that's part of the strategy we've taken, is to minimize the length of the maturity on these taxable bonds in comparison to the tax-exempt bonds.
Okay. And I think that's a great strategy. Thank you. If I could.
Go ahead. Yes.
Mr. Cotter, I believe, is who I'd like to ask this question of. First of all, I don't know if anybody's been on the website, and you can access it through siouxfalls.org of the webcam. I'm watching the construction activity go on right now out at the event center, and it ties very well to the map that you gave of where they're going to be working. You can see exactly that's where they are working right now. My question applies to Russell Street and the resurfacing that we're going to be doing out there, and wondering how we coordinated that work with the major work that's going to be going on Russell Street by the state here starting next spring, I imagine. We're not going to be resurfacing that just to tear it up again, are we?
Right. The only thing we're doing is we're crossing Russell, so we'll be crossing it perpendicular. The Russell Street project is scheduled to bid in February of 13, and then it'll take 2 years to construct those improvements. So the only impact that we'll have to Russell is a narrow trench that comes perpendicular to it.
Okay, thank you.
No?
Other questions from council? Councilor Staggers.
Yes. Mike Cooper, if I could. Mike, on the SMG agreement that we have here, can you tell me the max amount of money SMG could get per year? Because we talk about the base fee of $100,000, then we talk about some escalators and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the base fee will start at $100,000, and the maximum incentives will be another $100,000 the first year.
Okay, and this escalator, I guess I'm not sure what that's all about.
Well, that's an incentive program. You know, when we talked about how can we encourage the facility manager to maximize the use of these facilities? And so one of the ways that you do that is by setting a benchmark for them in terms of gross revenue. And then if they exceed that throughout the year, then you reward them.
Yeah.
And so that's built into the contract.
Yeah, and so what is the max they could probably get off of that escalator?
$100,000 the first year, and then it would go up.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And then $100,000 the second year, then, or
Okay, the first year the base management fee will be $100,000, and they're eligible for another $100,000 maximum.
That first year?
Okay, you're talking towards the end of the contract. Why don't you ask your question one more time?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. Okay, so we had the base fee of $100,000.
Starting year one, and that goes up 2.5% each year.
Okay.
And then the incentive also goes up 2.5% each year. It's basically the same amount of the management fee would be the incentive per year.
Okay.
And I'll put together a chart that you can see in that more detail.
Okay, that's good, because in 2011, you mentioned that SMG and Global, we paid a total management fee of $264,676.
That was with incentives.
With incentives?
Yep.
I guess what I'm wondering is, we could probably exceed that then with this, or not? No?
No, the final year of the contract, which is 2017,
okay.
The maximum total fees that they would be eligible for would be $220,000.
$220,000.
Yes.
Okay, that's the main thing I wanted to know. So 2018, 220,000.
2017.
Max, or 2017.
220,000.
Max.
Maximum. Half of that would be the management fee. The other half would be the incentives.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Also, too, I'm just wondering, SMG. Here we are in the fall of 2012. 2 years from now, we're going to be having the facility opening. Is SMG actively looking for groups to come to the new facility right now, or not?
Well, right now they're not actively going out because, well, yeah, I mean, they are looking at booking events in the current arena, and Global is now responsible for booking events in the convention center. That continues through this year. Once the management contracts have been approved, then we'll be working primarily with SMG to start booking for all of the facilities going into the future.
So next spring, they'll probably be out there looking, SMG.
Well, I would say yet this fall.
Okay.
That we'll start really aggressively putting that marketing plan together.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Mike and the whole staff, I guess, I think it's real exciting that we're seeing a reduction, that 24% reduction. All of us had talked about that before, that getting one management firm was a solution to saving some money. And even though we have to part ways with some good people and a good group, this was part of our goal in the beginning, was to reduce that expense. So it's very good to see finally. And do I have that right, that the $100,000 essentially really covers the service agreement, and that's really it? I mean, there's no other expenses that the city will have to SMG, other than capital improvements that are done,
That's
right?
correct, yes.
So the number of staff that they would be having under SMG that is covered by $100,000, I mean, these guys are stumbling over themselves to get this bid, if I can interpret this properly, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, tell me where the carrot is for them.
Well, they'll have other revenue that they'll be eligible for beyond the city
Okay,
management fee.
that's what I was wondering.
Yes.
Okay, and I really like the idea of the food ovations agreement, that there is no fee, and that it's based on commissions. Was that ever a discussion on the operating agreement, to do something on just commissions like that?
It really isn't feasible. I mean, today SMG and Savor, all their revenue comes from concessions.
Sure.
So that's just the way the industry is set up. It's really not feasible to run the management of it just strictly on commission. But the food and beverage, you can do it that way.
Sales. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councilor Entenmann.
You know, I just wanted to inform Councilor Staggers that I've been, as always, I'm very involved with the CVB and also with the Sports Authority as the city's representative on the Sports Authority. And these two organizations have been actively promoting and trying to sell this new event center as well as the current arena and the convention center, as they always do. The thing that they do have problems with the Sports Authority is we can't really go out and really market and sell this until the building is constructed. It's been done before in some places, in some facilities. The facility doesn't meet the construction timeline, and they're hung with a real big nut out there. So they don't want to do that. So needless to say, they are promoting it. We have a lot of activity on the Sports Authority side on this, as we do with the CVB and Terry Schmidt and her staff. And I'm very confident, as they are, as well as the management groups I know at the SMG, that once we get well into this process, that we will be actively soliciting, and we really are very, very hopeful, and we're very confident that we're going to be able to fill this facility, and we're going to make Sioux Falls proud with this.
Great, thank you. Other questions from councilors? Councilor Jameson?
A couple, or go ahead, Tracy.
May I, just to tag on to Mike Cooper's answer to your last question about the structure of the SMG agreement in comparison to the Ovations agreement. One of the reasons, and this, I think that would be an ideal situation if we could incentivize our facility manager just like the food and beverage operator is incentivized to maximize revenues. The reason we can't, or one of the reasons we can't do that with the facility manager or the SMG agreement has to do with the IRS limitations on private use of the facility. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier about using taxable bonds to fund the food service portion of the facility. Because we've done that, we can have an agreement like we have with Ovations where they can make as much profit as they can, because when they make profit, we make profit. That's good for the city. We can't do that with the overall facility. The only way we could is to finance the whole thing with taxable bonds, and that certainly would defeat the purpose then.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mayor, go ahead.
And Councilor Jameson, just to give you some credit, the two questions that you asked were almost identical to the questions that I had. So I commend you, because I had the exact same questions.
I can see it now. Huther Jameson.
We're right on target. We're together. It was great.
Together.
So very, very good. Very, very good. It's the business acumen in you, and I appreciate it. Because, yeah, you're right. If we could get away with just an incentivized contract, it would be perfect. But I actually got the exact same answer, too. So that's a good sign. But, yeah, and then back to SMG, your other question in terms of, hey, what's their incentive? Are you kidding me? They're only going to make $200,000 on this deal? Yes, they do make money in other ways. So good job, Councilor Jameson.
Councilor Jameson did have a question, so if you would go ahead.
Thank you. Probably Mark Cotter, if I could. Mark, I've heard from somebody that there was potentially some rumblings, if you might say, at the convention center due to some of that blasting, some effects. Has there been any ramifications on anything cracking, coming loose, anything?
I think one day we had some dust come down from the ceiling, but The contractor itself has seismic tolerances that they have to work within, and then we, the city, hired a third party to also set up respective seismographs. Whether it's, if we're doing something real close to the convention center, we set them up right there. And we also, if we're doing something close to Western Avenue, we'll put seismographs next to the school building and the utility billing office. And so all of them have been under the tolerance. And so the blaster on that job is concrete materials, and so they're working within their tolerances. And then there's a separate blasting contractor that's on the sanitary sewer. We're doing third-party seismic evaluation on both to make sure we can make sure that whether they can do it with a single shot or, as they call it, decking it, having two different times of explosives, that we're on top of that. We've got an expert in the field for us.
If any damages were to occur, they've got insurance to cover that.
Certainly.
Okay. The other question mark is the one of the last slides you went over was the updated renderings or updated drawings. Are you talking changes to the building, or are you talking just, what do you mean by updated?
Well, essentially, as the design has progressed, we've looked at different aspects of utilizing. When we first started the project, we wanted to make sure that this was a building that really had some South Dakota pride, but also Sioux Falls pride. So we've updated the renderings that involve areas like near the ticket booth with quartzite. We've got a club that has more of a slate that would come from the western South Dakota, and we also have another club that has Kasota stone that would come from the Mankato area. You know, so all local stones. The other thing that we really have refined is the ceilings and all of the soffits. And so we have a lot of different ceiling treatments that there's a nice soffit, and then there's like a wood ceiling. And so it's catching the design up. I mean, the design team is designing a $115 million project, and they're progressing well. And now, since we've been able to go to the market with about 60% of the project, they've been able to also catch up the interior design to ultimately what people will see and experience. And so it's our intent is to have those now as close as possible. The Design Elements Committee has weighed in on the architecture of them, and so it's just to make them as current as possible with the current design. So I would say more refinements than changes.
Okay, that's what I was really after, I guess, in the end, is I suppose you have to start off with something, and then as you've made final decisions, it does get laid in there. The other probably follow-up would be then if there's those design alternatives that are getting used, and or, you know, you're 60% of the way bid through the project, you know, and if you spent 60% of your allocated budget, or are you on track with budget, and have you had to use any of those design alternatives or add-ins, or what you have a term for them?
Both contingencies from Mortensen and the city are still in place. I would say updated renderings, just like with the new center hung scoreboard. Everything that people have seen to this point has been the end wall scoreboard. So we take the end wall scoreboards off, and we now will display what a center hung. There's just a series of those types of updates that people will see with the new renderings. We've updated the ceilings. That, you know, a lot of things that you'll see in these buildings is you'll see the ceilings as you progress through. You'll see the terrazzo floor in the entryway. You know, there's just a number of things that, as Coke Hazards really allowed the design to catch up, we'll be able to show you them in the renderings.
The full contingency is left today.
Other questions from council?
Yeah, the full contingency is left to date.
Great.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot from this side. Anything from this side before I go back over here? Okay, Councilor Staggers, go ahead.
Yes, Mike Cooper. Mike, you mentioned, and also the mayor mentioned, that SMG is going to be making money elsewhere too. Can you tell us other areas where they're going to be making money?
Probably the best way to answer that, Councilor, would be to put together kind of a summary of maybe some of their budgets, and I'd be happy to provide that to you. But, you know, they're in charge of renting facilities, ticket sales. Right now they do have food and beverage revenue through the arena. So it's just a combination of those different activities that they're involved with
So are they going to get some?
beyond our management fee.
Yeah, are they going to get a percentage of the parking and
No.
ticket fees, or,
They would still be involved with ticket sales, yes.
so they'll get a percentage of the ticket
Yes, mhm.
sales? Yeah, if you could,
But we'll put together a little more detail on that for you.
yeah, okay,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay, reminding council and the public that these agreements are on siouxfalls.org. I assume they're at /event center as noted on the PDF, or on the PowerPoint that you've seen this afternoon. Council, you have 2 weeks to review this in detail, and I would encourage you to talk with staff about it. I encourage you to come with your laundry list of questions about both of these agreements. And I would encourage the public to do the same thing. Be in contact with your council member if there are things that concern you, if you don't understand how these contributions are going, if you don't understand the fee structure. Let's make sure that it's very clear. So October 9th at 4 o'clock is when we'll really dig into this even more than we have this afternoon, and so I invite you to just be engaged in that as well. Anything else? I would thank the group for an amazing presentation, lots of great stuff. And with that, if I'm hearing nothing more from council, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.